Hello everyone, Earl Henderson, Primordial Defense. Thank you for watching. I have another Monday quarterback video for you. I'm going to play this video and talk about things that are going on, to better explain what's going on, and talk about things that I think that are being done right and or done wrong. Here we go.
I'm Sergeant Washington Moscoso with the San Antonio Police Department. This critical incident video release is intended to provide you with information, as the department currently understands it, about an officer-involved shooting that occurred on May 27th on the 100 block of Sonora Street. I will walk you through the video, relevant to the facts of the incident as we know them so far. Content of the video may not be suitable for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. While on patrol, two officers who were riding in the same patrol vehicle were dispatched to the location for a suspicious person with a gun. SAPD did receive several calls for service to the same location for similar details. The first caller indicated they saw a man running around the street shooting a gun.
County 911, this is Julie. Can you please fire or EMS?
Police. There's somebody at my next door yard running around in the street with a gun shooting at about 2 houses down from me.
What is he wearing?
He's wearing a black shirt. It looks like dark gray shorts, black shoes.
The second caller stated they heard gunshots and people yelling.
San Antonio 911, this is Tiara. Do you need police, fire, or EMS?
We need a police. We need police. There's like a shootout outside my home in the middle of the street.
Okay, can you see anything or you just hear gunshots?
Gunshots and people yelling.
As officers arrived, several witnesses pointed in the direction of the suspect. One of the witnesses told the officers the suspect was shooting near his house and kids.
Come here. Who's screaming?
Officers ran down the street and could hear the disturbance in front of a residence. Officers located the suspect with gun in hand, standing next to a shirtless male. Officers immediately gave verbal commands to drop the gun. The suspect then raises the firearm and points it at the officer.
Put the gun down! Hey, drop it!
Both officers discharged their firearms, striking the suspect multiple times. Officers on scene began life-saving measures prior to EMS arriving at the scene. Ultimately, the suspect was transported to a local hospital where he was pronounced deceased. No one other than the suspect was injured by the gunfire. The suspect was identified as 42-year-old Arturo Fuentes. Here's video from the second officer's body camera.
Put the gun down! Hey!
Here is slowed-down footage of the suspect raising the firearm towards the officers. Here is an image of the suspect's firearm. Investigations into deadly force are comprehensive and can take over a year. A reminder, this is our current understanding of the situation and could change as investigators gather more information. The San Antonio Police Department does not make any determinations as to whether procedures were followed until all facts are known. All officer-involved shootings are forwarded to the Bexar County District Attorney's Office for review. As of this publication, the investigation remains ongoing.
All right.
The first caller indicated they saw a man running around the street shooting a gun.
So, 911 call comes in. Actually, multiple 911 calls come in of a person running around with a gun and shots being fired. One person's describing, I think there's a gunfight going on outside, people yelling. We see the officers get out, and all we see is pistols. That is a problem to me. And this is probably the #1 chief complaint for these videos that I do. Officers neglecting to get their rifles out when they need to be getting them out. This is 110% for sure a high-risk call. A person not only reported to be with a gun, but shooting the gun. That has a very high increased likelihood of a gunfight occurring. If you know that you're going to a gunfight, bring a rifle and bring your friends with rifles. Gunfighting 101. But sadly, all across this nation, time after time, we see many incidents where officers are neglecting to get their rifles out. And I think that this is kind of a multifaceted problem. Two big kind of things that play into it. And in some places, there's a third thing that can kind of play into it. So, number one, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's a good thing, but number one is at the local level, police just aren't getting in the gunfights every single day. Now, despite how many videos I have on this channel showing officer-involved shootings and all the other videos still out on the internet that I haven't got to yet showing officer-involved shootings, you may think, oh, wow, that's a lot. But when you break it down and you look at the local level, think about your local agency. When was the last time they were involved in a gunfight? And if it was recent, when was the time before that they were involved in a gunfight? So these agencies are just not getting involved in gunfights on a regular basis. Most officers can go their entire career and never have to shoot anyone. They may point their gun at people, but they never have to shoot anyone. And so, because there's a lack of, I guess you say because there's a lack of trigger time, pun intended, a lack of experience in those regards, it's just not a learned thing with officers to be experiencing those things and get to the conclusion of, hey, we need rifles. Rifles are making a difference. So because they're not getting in the gunfights every single day, it's just something that is kind of lost upon them at that local level. The second thing that can go into it that may have an effect in some places is administrative red tape. And that would be in the form of the administration creating stupid and dangerous policies that modify officers' behaviors and how they act in regards to getting a rifle out. So some agencies may have policies in place that if an officer gets a rifle out of the car and has it, carrying it around, displaying it publicly, they have to notify a supervisor that they're getting that rifle out. And on top of that, they have to write a report justifying why they got that rifle out. In my opinion, the only reason why policies like that exist is for weak-ass leadership in the police department. Chiefs afraid to lose their place at the table when the mayor calls and says they got complaints about citizens calling in saying they were scared because they saw police officers getting shotguns and rifles out of their cars. And then the police chief being like, oh, I don't want to lose my position. I don't want to go back to the road. I'll make a policy that says you got to write a report and all this justification on why you got your rifle out. And if you ain't good enough, you're going to get written up. That'll stop them from pulling their rifles out and making people call in and complain. Yeah. So that's one reason why I really wish that police departments, police chiefs were elected like sheriffs. That way police chiefs could tell mayors to fuck off. And it's not just with rifles where you see those policies in effect. There are some places that have those kind of red tape policies for tasers. If an officer pulls their taser out of their holster, they have to write a report on why they did that. Even if they didn't shoot anybody with the taser, just pulling the taser out of the holster and turning the red dot on, they have to write a report on why they did that. There's even some places that are starting to have officers write reports on why they pulled their handgun out of their holster. Obviously, they're not shooting anyone. They're just pulling their handgun out of their holster, and they're being forced to have to write reports on why they did that. Officers already have enough paperwork to do as it is from the normal day in, day out stuff. Accident reports, theft reports, domestic reports, all kinds of bull crap. They don't want to write any more reports on top of all the other crap they have to write. So, what does that make them do? Well, that modifies their behavior and makes them not want to do those things. So when it comes to rifles, they just don't pull the rifles out because they don't want to write a damn report on it. And when you go back to the fact that at the local level, there's just not gunfights happening every single day, they get into this mindset of, well, I don't really need the rifle. We're not going to get into a gunfight. All right, it's been 10 years since we had a shooting. Right? We're not getting into a gunfight. The last 10 calls we went on that was similar to this, nobody got shot. I don't need a rifle. So that lack of getting in the gunfights kind of builds some complacency, and then when you add in this red tape bull crap, that makes it even worse. But not all places have that red tape kind of bull crap. So the third thing that I think has an effect on it is training. And I just don't think that enough realistic training is being done at the academy level to instill a good fighting mindset in officers to make them want to go to rifle. When you look at incidents involving regular patrol officers who've only been to the academy, and you look at other incidents involving officers who've had higher levels of training because they're on a SWAT team or something like that, you will see that those officers who've had a higher level of training go to rifle. Why is that? Because they're better trained. There is a distinct difference, I guess you could say, between the low level of training that a person gets at the academy, which is a bare minimum standard, and the level of training one gets when they get to a SWAT team type of level. So there's something within the training that I think that is causing bad training scars, so to speak, and is just not delivering that mindset aspect of it the way it needs to be delivering it. So like one thing, for example, is the realism in training. So training needs to be recent, relevant, and realistic. And when it comes to rifle training, I don't think there's a lot of realism being involved in there, because when you look at your flat range work starting on the shooting line, when you go to handgun training and you're on the line and you have your duty belt on, you got your concealed carry rig on, you got your handgun on you, that's realistic because you're always going to have your handgun on you. So when the fight drill comes or the fight command starts, you draw your handgun from its holster and you put holes in target. That's realistic. Like I said, you're going to be carrying your handgun around with you all the time. When it comes to rifle, on the other hand, that's not realistic. You're not always going to be starting with a rifle in your hand. It's not Call of Duty where you sitting there with a rifle in your hand, swaying back and forth, and then boom, you just start shooting. It's not like that. That rifle is kept somewhere. And in this context, it's kept in a vehicle. So the rifle training for patrol, law enforcement, security needs to involve realistic drills where the students get their rifles from the vehicle, where it's going to be stored at. Go to that vehicle, get the rifle out, danger it up, get on the line, and then begin shooting. And I'm not saying that every single thing has to start off like that, but there needs to be enough evolutions in that class where the student is retrieving the rifle from its stowed position and then putting it into work. Otherwise, it's just not realistic to always start on the shooting line with a rifle, because you're not always going to be starting with a rifle in hand. So those three things right there, I think, are what kind of lead into why officers are neglecting to get their rifles out. So this vehicle here, I don't know where they keep the rifle at. I don't know if it's in the cab of the vehicle, it's in a rifle mount. I don't know if it's in the trunk. I don't know. The best way to go about getting your rifle is when you get that call, stop. Stop the car. Get your rifle out. Danger it up, and then proceed to the scene. That way, when you get there, as soon as you dismount from that vehicle, you've got a rifle in hand ready to put to work. If you don't do that, then when you get on scene and shit pops off, you're probably not going to have time to get that rifle out where it's from, danger it up, and then put it into play. It doesn't take that long to get the rifle ready, but if you're on the objective and shit pops off and it's locked in a mount or it's locked in the trunk, it's in a case, and you're going to have to charge it, turn the sight on, take the dust caps off, deploy the sling, extend the stock, get this damn thing in fighting condition. That's forever. Just those few seconds is just forever, and you may not have the opportunity to ever do that. So the best thing is once that call is received, stop the car, get that rifle out, undo the sling, put it around your neck, wear it kind of like a necklace, 1-point kind of configuration, have the muzzle and barrel in between your legs as you're driving, charge it, go ahead and put it around in the chamber, turn your sights on, get a sight picture, look through it, see if you like the brightness of your dot or not, remove any dust caps, and then proceed. And then when you get there and dismount from that vehicle, boom, that rifle is right there in front of you, ready to play.
Ran down the street and could hear the disturbance in front of a residence. Officers located the suspect with gun in hand, standing next to a shirtless male. Officers immediately gave verbal commands to drop the gun. The suspect then raises the firearm and points it at the officer.
Put the gun down! Hey, drop it!
Both officers discharged their firearms, striking the suspect multiple times. Officers on scene began life-saving measures prior to EMS arriving at the scene. Ultimately, the suspect was transported to a local hospital where he was pronounced deceased. No one other than the suspect was injured until a life-saving discharge.
Put the gun down!
The suspect then raises the firearm and points it at the officer.
So when it comes to low-light tactics, a lot of engagements occur in low-light conditions. And the human eyes cannot see in low light that well. There is a reason why before we excelled at being able to manipulate artificial light, that when the sun went down, we stopped doing shit. we don't have the tapetum lucidium in our eyes like animals do. We don't see in the dark very well. And we have to have artificial light to see at night well enough to be able to allow our brains to receive as much data as possible. So high lumen, high candela count is pretty important. The more light you can project out and splash onto target, the more data that your brain is going to be able to receive, analyze, and then be able to make a decision from. As far as the tactics go, there's a couple schools of thought on weapon-mounted lights and searching with them. One school of thought is do not search with your weapon-mounted light, because that means that you are pointing your weapon or potentially pointing your weapon at things that you do not want to destroy. And instead, the school of thought is to use a searchlight, somewhat similar to what this officer was doing. Let me see if I can back it up to get it in frame a little bit better. Okay, so you can see that he has a searchlight in this hand, and he has a weapon in this hand that also has a weapon-mounted light. So that first school of thought is do not use your weapon-mounted light for searching, because you could be potentially pointing your weapon at things that you do not want to destroy. I get that. Another school of thought is it's okay to use your weapon-mounted light for searching. So long as you're keeping your finger off the trigger, you're not going to be sending any rounds out of that gun. Yes, you are technically violating one of the cardinal rules of pointing your weapon or potentially pointing your weapon at things that you do not want to destroy. But if you've got a higher level of training, then it should not be that big of an issue. Now, it's also, with that school of thought, can be location dependent on how you're doing that. So, like in a warfare kind of scenario where you're out somewhere, in another part of the world, maybe not that big of an issue. And those people will say that in the domestic application, it is a bigger issue because of how the laws are set up over in another country, in a war zone. The rules of engagement. There's an acceptable collateral damage aspect. Like, you don't want to have people inadvertently die, but it's just an accepted thing. It's called collateral damage. Whereas here domestically in the U.S., there really is no acceptance of collateral damage, not to the degree that it would be in a war zone. So, a couple different schools of thought with that. When it comes to searching with your searchlight and finding your target, then at that point you should definitely transition to weapon-mounted light and keep that weapon-mounted light on that target. So what do you do with your searchlight? Well, you can either take the time to put that searchlight away into your pouch that it goes into, the D-ring it goes into. If it's got a clip on it, clipping it back onto your vest or onto your pocket, however you store that light. The second option is to drop that thing out of your hand, to jettison it as quickly as possible, and then go to a two-handed grip on your handgun, and using that weapon-mounted light to keep that target illuminated. This is why you see some handheld flashlights having a lanyard attached to it, so you can have that lanyard around your wrist, search with that light, and then when you need to drop that light, you get it out of your hand, but it still retains to you. The Therm, I think I'm pronouncing it right. I don't think I've ever heard anybody pronounce it. The Therm switch accessory that can go on a flashlight, basically like a ring for your finger to slip into. It's on the tail cap of the light. You can utilize something like that, flip it out of the way, go to a two-handed grip with that, and then take your hand off the gun and flip that light back around, and boom, it's in your hand where you're able to start searching with it again, and then boom, flip it out of the way to be able to go to your gun again. So that's an option. When it comes to larger lights, like a larger patrol light, like a stream light kind of light, your only true two options are to either drop the damn thing or take the time to put it back into the D-ring or the pouch that it came out of. That could be situationally dependent on what's going on. Can't say one is better than the other. It depends on the situation. So, and something like this, where it's very dynamic, very fluid, the guy does have a gun in his hand, I think it would have been the better option to just jettison that searchlight out of the hand and immediately go to the gun and activate weapon-mounted light from there. Ideally, he should be having a rifle, but I've already addressed that problem. I mentioned high lumen, high candela. That is extremely important, so that you can positively identify not just the target itself, but whether or not they are armed. Technology has improved very well over the last several years. I remember early 2000s having like the Surefire G2, and it having a big whopping 60 lumen lamp in it, and then if you bought the upgraded lamp, you could have 90 lumens, but you only had like 30 minutes runtime out of it. And I remember thinking, yeah, I'm the shit, man. I got this Surefire G2, yeah, the cat's meow. And now, Now you get another light of the same size that's putting out like 600 lumens, and it's just like, wow. I didn't know how much I sucked back then. Everybody sucked back then. But so I could only imagine what the next 10 years is going to look like in terms of light output. But the more candela, the more lumens, the better. Like I said, we rely on light to be able to see very well and analyze what we're seeing so our brain can make better decisions. So the more light, the better. There's a saying, I want all the lumens.
Verbal commands to drop the gun. The suspect then raises the firearm and points it at the officer.
So there's multiple people about. You got some people in the street. You got these people here. Now, what these people are doing, I don't know. But this guy has been walking around shooting his gun, acting stupid. Why the hell would you want to be out there around that person, trying to engage with them in conversation or Snapchatting what's going on? Why? Why would you want to put yourself at risk like that? That makes no sense to me. If there is someone outside shooting a gun for no good reason, you don't want to be anywhere near them. You don't know if they're going to turn that gun on you and shoot you. When the police do get there, there could be a gunfight, and stray rounds could be coming towards you. If there's no need for you to be out doing anything, don't go out. Don't go out there trying to record with your phone. Don't go out there trying to talk sense into someone. If there was any ability to talk sense into this person, it would have happened a long time ago, and this person never would have done what they did. They are beyond being able to have any sense talked into them. That's why they're doing the stupid shit that they're doing. All you're doing is putting yourself at risk when you go out and start poking your nose around in incidents like this.
Put the gun down!
See how close these two are. They are super close to each other. And these officers, although, they're not like super far away, but they are far enough away to where it's stretching it with the pistol. This guy is super lucky he didn't get hit by any stray rounds. And when it comes to gunfights, there's a lot of missed rounds in gunfights. A lot of rounds go stray, and they do not hit their intended target, especially with handguns. Handguns are not very accurate. They have a very short barrel, and there's only 2 points of contact on that handgun to help minimize the overall movement in that gun. Just the mere pulling of the trigger, that action alone can interject enough movement into that gun to where it throws your shot placement off significantly. Up close, you may not notice that much of a difference, but as you add increments of distance, it becomes very noticeable. So the fact that more than one officer fired and this guy did not get hit, that's good. Now, I do think that equipment has a play in this. Not so much these officers' skill set and being able to shoot accurately, but I think some of the equipment that they're using has had a playing hand in that.
Hey, drop it!
The gun, and this is not a good freeze frame, but his gun has a red dot sight on it. Let's see if I can get a freeze frame of that. Yeah, not going to be able to get a good freeze frame on him. I think maybe at the beginning we can see a red dot on his pistola. Okay, so obviously I'm not.
Officers, suspect with gun in hand, standing next to.
Yeah. Sometimes I can get the freeze frame just right, other times I'm not. So this is probably the best I'm going to be able to get on freeze frame. But he has a red dot sight on his pistol. That is a good benefit to a red dot on a pistol is improved accuracy. You are more likely to be able to put more accurate rounds on target with a red dot on your pistol than you are using iron sights. That's just a fact. So I do think that some of their equipment set up here had a playing hand in ensuring that that other person did not get shot. And this goes into another reason on why a rifle would have been better. A rifle is more accurate, it has a longer barrel, and there's more points of contact on that rifle to help stabilize it and reduce as much movement in that overall system as possible. The less movement, the better, the more accurate you're going to be.
Standing next to a shirtless male. Officer commands to drop the gun, firearm, and points it at the officer.
Put the gun down! Hey, drop it!
Both officers discharge their firearms, striking the suspect multiple times.
So he fires one-handed. Not the best way to be shooting a handgun. The best way to be shooting a handgun is two-handed. When you take one hand off the gun, you're essentially slashing your accuracy in half at that point. Because you're only getting one hand on the gun, and it just makes it less accurate. So out of all the rounds he fired, I'm pretty confident that not all of them hit the intended target. I bet there are some holes in the side of this house from him shooting his gun one-handed. It seemed like to me he was putting his flashlight away and then going to his gun.
Officers on scene.
Because he does not have a light in his hand at this point, but as he starts to get closer, he transitions again and brings out a light in his
where
hand.
he was pronounced deceased. No one.
So I think it would have been better had he jettisoned that light out of his hand and immediately went to a good two-handed grip on that gun and then activated his weapon-mounted light. Earlier, it did look like his weapon-mounted light came on, but he doesn't really utilize it a whole lot during this encounter. Why? I don't know. It could be that he is so used to using that handheld light that that's his preferred way of using the illumination, and he rarely uses that weapon-mounted light. It could be his weapon-mounted light is dying. It's not putting out enough brightness. And if that's the case, then that leads into another topic. There needs to be a rotation cycle on batteries for your weapon-mounted light if you're not using rechargeables. So, and that's going to be dependent on how much you use that. So if you're in a busier area and you're having to pull your gun out of your holster on a more frequent basis, then that's more times your light's being discharged and depleting your battery capacity. And you're going to have to replace those batteries more frequently. If you're in an area where you're not so busy, you can go a little bit longer with the batteries in your gun because you're not using them as much. So it's really going to be dependent upon where you're at and how much you're using that equipment. But you do need to be rotating batteries out before you start to notice the light diminishing. The CR123s are expensive. I get that. I feel the pain. But it is best to just go ahead and throw batteries away before you start to notice diminishing light, because you don't want to run into a scenario where you think the light's good and then within a couple minutes of it being on or a few seconds of it being on, boom, it starts dropping in output. This makes it easier to do when you buy those batteries in bulk. So I like to use Batteries Plus. I don't know if they're the best place to get, cheap CR123s, but it's probably the more convenient for me. There may be other sources to be able to get, way cheaper CR123s, but I prefer just to buy CR123s in bulk. I'll buy a big sleeve of them. I think like 18 or 20 something batteries come in a pack. I forget how many come in there. But when I break it down for the cost of buying that big old sleeve of batteries is cheaper than if I went out and just bought 2 packs of batteries at a time. And if you're going to be doing a rotation on that, then the sleeve of batteries that you get and the shelf life, as far as how long they last, that should work out for you. You should be able to buy a whole sleeve of batteries and go through a rotation cycle on them. And by the time you get to that last set of batteries in it, those batteries are still good because you've used it within a reasonable amount of time, pretty soon within those batteries' shelf life. The CR123's got like a 10 plus year shelf life on them. After 10 years of sitting on the shelf, they should still have like 70% capacity in them or something like that, or discharge capacity, whatever the terminology is. That's pretty good. Whereas alkaline batteries, you may not get that type of performance out of them.
Officer's body camera.
Put the gun down! Hey!
So check out the
Go from
beam
the second
on his
officer's body
light.
camera.
Put the gun down! Hey!
Boom. That is a nice light right there. That might be a turbo light that he
Here's
has
video
on,
from the
maybe.
second officer's body camera.
Put the gun down! Hey!
I can't tell what kind of light he has on his gun, but it is putting out a good amount of light in my opinion. It's got a really nice tight beam on it. It's got really good throw. It's got some decent spill on it. Almost looks like a Surefire, but I can't tell for sure. Yeah, I can't tell for sure what he has. But weapon-mounted lights are, in my opinion, a requirement for all fighting guns. Every fighting gun you have should have a weapon-mounted light on it. Even if you predominantly work daytime, you're a day shift person, your handgun should still have a weapon-mounted light on it. Just because you work days doesn't mean you won't find yourself in a low-light environment. You could be in a basement, you could be in a large building, in a hallway that there's no windows with artificial or natural light coming in through the windows, and the overhead lights aren't on as far as artificial light, so you need a good weapon-mounted light on your gun. When it comes to weapon-mounted lights, I recommend Surefire, Streamlight, and Mod Light. Surefire has been around for quite some time. A lot of their products are used heavily by law enforcement and military. Streamlight's been around for a long time. Streamlight's pretty heavily used by a lot of law enforcement. Mod Light is kind of a newer kid on the block, I guess you could say. They've got some pretty damn good lights. I'm sure they have some contracts with agencies where, or maybe not contracts, but they've got some agencies who buy in bulk from them, potentially. But I know a lot of individual people will buy from them, and they got pretty good light output on their weapon-mounted lights. I actually put a mod light on my newer rifle build, and it's got a very tight beam on it. So it punches out pretty far, and it'll light stuff up real nice. You cannot skimp on quality gear. So I understand, yes, these lights are freaking expensive. Yes, like $200 plus for a quality weapon-mounted light. I know that's a hard one to swallow if you are having to buy your own stuff. People who do concealed carry, you already understand this, right? You have to buy all your shit. And you may think that the police are given all their equipment, and that's not true. Some agencies will provide everything. There's a lot of agencies out there don't. Here in Kentucky, in Louisville, Kentucky, the largest city in the state, they don't issue out a whole lot of stuff to their individual officers. Those officers have to go buy their own stuff. They have to buy their own rifles. the largest the largest city in the state of Kentucky tells their police officers they have to buy their own fucking guns. How stupid is that? But that happens a lot all across this nation. And when you look at the salaries for police and law enforcement, it's not that great. It's really not. And so, got a family and everything. Yes, I get it. It is hard to swallow $200 expenditure on a weapon-mounted light. And you may be tempted to be like, oh, here's this O-light that puts out these amount of lumens, and look at the price on it. It's a way better price. Don't do that. Please, 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 please do not do that. There's a reason why you do not see industry professionals using things like O-light. And I think that's also one reason why you see so many in law enforcement using Streamlight, because Streamlight is a little bit cheaper in price than Surefire. But between all of them, number one for sure, I think Surefire should be first choice, Streamlight, and then Mod Light. Those are some pretty well-made lights, peer-reviewed and recommended by industry professionals. You just won't see any industry professionals out there recommending an O-light for a weapon-mounted light. So, yeah, they're expensive. I get it, but so is a funeral, right? And actually, a funeral is going to be way more expensive than a weapon-mounted light. So, save your pennies. Stop getting Starbucks if you get Starbucks. Go a few weeks without getting those. Cut some corners on some food. You don't have to eat out all the time. Make some sandwiches at the house, right? Bring them to work. Save that money. Get that good quality gear. There's just some things you cannot skimp on. There's some things where you have to buy once, cry once. I wish they would have provided some more information on the person, what's going on with them. They didn't provide any information on this person, and I didn't care to look. I've got so many videos to do, so far behind on them, that I just can't go into in-depth research on all of these incidents, trying to find out the people involved and all that. But based off what was going on, would not be surprised if this person was on drugs and or had a criminal history, a repeating criminal history at that. The handgun itself, who knows if this guy was legally able to possess it or not. My guess is he probably wasn't legally able to possess it, and so that then brings the question of where did this gun come from? Usually the people who cannot legally possess guns are in possession of stolen guns, whether they stole it themselves or they bought it from someone who stole it. Or some of them have friends and family members who can pass a background check and go to a gun store and actually get the gun, and then they'll sell it back to them for cash. Or those people give those people cash to go get it, and they just hand it all over to them. See a mixed match of ammunition here. So this guy was, scrounging up whatever he could find. So the fact that we see a mixture of ammo kind of tells me that he's probably not able to go. Well, he probably thinks he's not able to go into gun stores and buy ammo because, he probably has a criminal background. So it looks like he's probably scrounged up some stuff that, he was able to get here and there because he's not able to reliably go into a store and buy things. As a felon, you're not obviously able to go into a gun store and buy a gun because you won't pass that background check, but there's no background check on ammo. So I think a lot of them just think they probably wouldn't be able to buy it, and they just kind of source it from other people, and they kind of buy stuff here and there. That's why you see a lot of times there's a mixed match of different ammo because they're just getting it from different places. Alright, that is it. Not much else to talk about. If you like what you hear and see, go ahead and give me a like and a share. If you have not already, hit the subscribe button and stay tuned for more Monday quarterback videos Earl Henderson, Primordial Defense. Thank you for watching.